You are not stuck for lack of talent, nor for lack of time. The truth is more intimate, more uncomfortable, and almost no one talks about it. You are stuck because you are afraid of being seen, not seeing in the sense of attention or fame, but of being seen in your creative essence, of putting something of yours into the world and not knowing if the world will accept it, or worse, if the world will ignore it. Creating is an act of voluntary exposure. It is standing up naked in a room full of invisible judgments. And every human being has hidden ghosts that hate this kind of exposure. What paralyzes an artist is not the lack of technique. It is the presence of a memory, a criticism that hurt more than it should, a father who mocked a drawing, a teacher who corrected it cynically, a cold silence after a sincere delivery. These memories do not disappear, they hide, and they come back every time we try to reveal ourselves. Many creators spend their entire lives adjusting the lights, organizing the color palette, buying the best brushes, but they never paint. Because painting means allowing yourself to make mistakes in front of an internal audience. What's at stake is not the line. It's the symbolic value you give it. If you think that what you create is a direct reflection of your worth, then every criticism becomes an attack, and every silence becomes a sentence. In this video, we'll unearth what really stops you from creating. We'll dive into the anatomy of creative block, not as a technical problem, but as a psychological symptom. Because creating is much less about doing and much more about allowing yourself to be. You'll understand why some ideas disappear from your head the exact moment you open the editor, why you postpone projects you say you love, and why, deep down, you feel ashamed of something no one has seen. Because that something carries a piece of you that is still wounded. If you feel this way, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, this video is the beginning of a reunion between you and your own courage. The fear of creating does not begin in the present. It is an old scar, sometimes so old that it is confused with the way we learn to exist. Creating is a dangerous verb for those who have been conditioned to survive. Because when you create, you expand. Show yourself, move beyond the walls of acceptance. But those who have suffered rejection learn that expanding can mean disappearing. Behind creative block, there is almost always an unnamed trauma. And I am not referring to the dramatic, cinematic trauma, but to the everyday micro-trauma. The mother who said, "That's not for you," the friend who laughed at an idea, the school that taught that only those who follow the rules will succeed. These are small moments, but full of meaning. When they happen in childhood, where creativity is an extension of identity, these episodes shape the relationship with self-expression. Julia Cameron, author of The Artist's Way, calls this a wounded creator, a part of us that, having been discredited too early, learned to protect itself from the pain of exposure. And protection is disguised as procrastination, perfectionism, escape through technique, intellectual cynicism. All of these are masks of fear. Fear of being judged, of not being good, of being forgotten. But mainly, fear of being perceived in a part of the soul that you yourself do not know if you can sustain. It is as if the unconscious were saying, if I do not create, no one will be able to reject me. If I do not try, I will be safe. But this security is a prison disguised as a comfort zone. Because not creating is also suffering, only a more silent suffering, more socially acceptable. No one demands a work that has not been started, but the soul feels the emptiness of what has not been attempted. Van Gogh, in his letters to his brother Theo, wrote not about the fear of failure, but about the fear of never being heard. He painted as if his life depended on it, and perhaps it did. He was never accepted in life, but he created anyway. Because for some, not creating hurts more than criticism. Psychology explains that emotional exposure activates the same brain circuits as physical pain. In other words, being rejected for something you created can hurt as much as a burn. But here's the paradox. The only way to heal this pain is by creating. Creating even when you're afraid. Creating with an open wound. Because it's through the creative act that you begin to rebuild confidence in your own worth. Nietzsche said, "Art exists so that the truth doesn't destroy us." Creating is enduring your own truth being seen. Enduring the vulnerability of showing what you feel, what you dream, what you want, with no guarantee that the world will understand. And yet, doing it anyway. But what if you grew up in an environment where showing feelings was considered a weakness, where expressing desires was dangerous? You became someone who edits their own thoughts before they even feel them. And that's why you often freeze before you say your first sentence, because your brain learned that creating is a risk to your life, even though today, rationally, it isn't. Creative block then is not laziness, it's a survival reflex. It's the limbic system saying, don't go there, we've been hurt there before. And if you're not aware of this, you'll spend your life feeling inadequate, thinking that the problem is a lack of discipline, when what's really missing is emotional security. This is the root cause that almost no one addresses, because it takes work to look within. It takes work to remember the first time you felt stupid for having a different idea. It takes work to admit that you've become your own worst censor. But there is a way, a process of reintegrating the creator you were before you were molded. It starts with a simple but revolutionary act: writing, drawing, singing, sketching, even if no one will see it. Even if it's bad, even if it hurts. Because this gesture, no matter how small, is an affirmation: I'm still here. And it's exactly at that point, where the pain of not creating equals the pain of exposing yourself, that rebirth begins. When the pain of exposing oneself becomes unbearable, the creator does not give up. He camouflages himself. He exchanges emotional nudity for the armor of technique. And so, without realizing it, many artists build fortresses around their own vulnerability, made of tutorials, certifications, expensive equipment, endless courses. It is the most sophisticated escape there is, that of the creator who studies so much that he never delivers. The cruel irony is that the more afraid we are of showing our essence, the more we convince ourselves that we need to be ready. As if there were some magical rite where one day we will finally wake up worthy of creating something legitimate. But that day never comes. And it never comes because the problem was never technical, it was always emotional. There is a psychological term called protective procrastination. It is when we postpone something important, convincing ourselves that we are still preparing. We read one more book, we attend one more class, we reorganize the project for the 10th time. All of this seems like action, but it is stagnation disguised as movement. Rick Rubin, in The Creative Act, reveals that a true artist is not someone who masters all the techniques. He is someone who is sensitive enough to hear the whispers of the invisible and has the courage to transcribe them, imperfectly, onto paper. The creator is not defined by the precision of his strokes, but by the honesty of his delivery. And yet, we live in an era that idolizes perfection. Software, filters, algorithms. Everything helps the artist become a provider of aesthetic services. Art, in this scenario, is no longer an expression. It is a product. And the creator, pressured by unattainable standards, begins to believe that it is not worth trying until he is excellent. But excellence is not a starting point. It is a side effect of those who have risked failure many times. The obsession with technique is often a fear of criticism disguised as capriciousness. Because if I say that I am still learning, no one will be able to judge me. If I say that I am not yet an artist, I will not have to face silence after sharing something I love. This is the contradiction we need to face. Technique is necessary, but only to the extent that it serves emotion. When it becomes a shield against exposure, it paralyzes. It makes the creator sterile. A worker of unlived potential. It is like endlessly rehearsing a play that never opens. You know every line, every move, but the curtain does not rise, and the audience does not exist. The stage remains empty because fear still occupies the center of the scene. The philosopher Slavoj Žižek said that sometimes we do not do what we love because we love it too much to see it fail. This is one of the most brutal truths of creation. The fear of not living up to our dreams makes us give up before trying. But what we forget is that failure is also part of the creative language. It is with it that we adjust the rhythm. A truth. Patti Smith tells in Just Kids that she and Robert Mapplethorpe pretended to be artists before they were recognized as such. They dressed like artists, behaved like artists. And in that pretense, they began to live their truth. The costume, the setting, the gesture, all of this created the space for creation to happen. Not despite the fear, but with it. After all, no one wakes up legitimate. You become legitimate by doing. by enduring the pain of being imperfect in the face of something you love, by accepting that your voice, the way it is today, is already worthy of being heard. Deep down, the creator only needs permission. And the saddest thing is that he expects this permission from the world when in fact only he can grant it. Being seen shouldn't be synonymous with pain, but for the wounded creator, it is. Every time someone looks at your work, it's like they're looking straight into your soul. And if that soul is still bleeding, any look becomes a threat. That's why so many creators disappear after the first critique. Or worse, they never show up, because they think they have to show everything or nothing. But there is a middle path, a process of gradual exposure where you reveal yourself little by little without mutilating yourself in the act of revealing yourself. Creating requires courage, yes, but courage is not the absence of fear. It's living with it, and the secret is learning to regulate this coexistence. Imagine a musician who decides to show his compositions only to a trusted friend. This gesture, small at first glance, is an emotional rehearsal. He is teaching his own body that it is possible to be seen and remain safe. Rainer Maria Rilke said, "You must create as if no one will see." And there is brutal wisdom in this idea, not because creation needs to be hidden forever, but because freedom is born from the absence of expectation. When you write, paint, sing, or record with the sole purpose of getting closer to your own essence, you get in touch with the most powerful part of yourself, the one that doesn't depend on applause to exist. That's why creative rituals are so important. They're not just about being disciplined. They're about protecting the sacred space of creation from all the external voices that try to interfere. A creator who establishes a schedule, a song, a rhythm, is doing more than just a routine. He's signaling to his mind that this is a territory where he can be whole, even if only for a moment. And it doesn't have to be grand. A hidden notebook, a folder on the computer, an anonymous account on social media. Small trenches where your art can breathe before being judged. Exposure, when well dosed, doesn't hurt, it strengthens. It's like sunbathing in the right doses. It illuminates, warms without burning. Another fundamental step is to separate the value of the work from personal value. Your creation is not you. It was born of you, but it doesn't define your totality. And that changes everything. Because a critique of your text is not a critique of your soul. It is an opinion about a fragment, an instant, an experiment. And that is liberating. You don't have to give up everything right now. You just have to not give up. Create, even if in pieces. Be seen, even if only by one glance. Because every time you publish, share, exhibit, or offer something authentic, you are telling the world, I am here. And maybe, just maybe, someone on the other side, who is also hiding, will find courage in seeing you show yourself. And so, without knowing it, your courage becomes a portal, and your art a medicine. You are not stuck because you lack talent. You are stuck because, at some point in your history, someone made you believe that showing who you are could be dangerous. And maybe it was. But now you are no longer that child who did not know how to defend himself. Now you can choose. Choose to create, even if it is trembling. Choose to show, even if it is little by little. Choose to exist in a complete way, even if it is in fragments. Creative block is not an enemy, it is a sign. It points to where it still hurts. And if you look honestly, you will see that the pain is not in the act of creating, but in the fear of not being accepted later. But the truth is that the acceptance that matters most does not come from outside. It begins when you stop hiding what you love. Creating is remembering who you are before the fear. It is rescuing versions of yourself that were silenced, discredited, erased, and giving them a voice. Maybe the world still does not understand your art. Maybe it will never understand. But you understand. And that is enough to start. So, if something inside you still pulsates when you hear all this, please don't ignore it. That impulse is your soul knocking on the door.